Let's talk about the Multiversal Naruto meta, where people are putting him up against Goku or against Infinity Gauntlet Thanos. He's competing with the big boys now. At least that's what's implied from getting Naruto to a multiversal level. Let's dive into some of the reasons why Naruto can be considered or is consistently argued to be universal.
Sasuke then remarks that although he can teleport using his Rinnegan, he can only do so over finite distances.
So Sasuke can use the Rinnegan to teleport finite distances, but this was when he was a teenager, so when he becomes an adult, he eventually gets more proficient with it, but we'll watch where they're going with this.
He would have not been able to do so, implying that the distance between each realm was infinite rather than finite.
So this is a key point here, that Kaguya's dimensions are infinite distance. And the reasoning for that is because Sasuke could only travel a finite distance. First of all, we know this is contradicted because all jutsu is connected to the user, so certain people can teleport to their own dimensions. Secondly, this is also contradicted because after sealing Kaguya, Sasuke himself teleports to Kaguya's dimension only to find Kinshiki and Momoshiki at Kaguya's palace. So it's not infinite, he just didn't have access to her dimension, or at least understand how to teleport to other dimensions like he learned how to in Boruto. The reason that Sasuke was able to perceive any of the Limbo clones was because of that Rinnegan, and it's not because of the Sharingan. So let's just clarify that, because earlier in the video, right, we also saw a bit of discussion here. So he goes to explain that the kanji that was used to translate heaven and earth is also used for universe, which is tenchi. All things in the universe, that was apparently tenchi. But the actual panel never uses tenchi once. Like, this was just a blatant lie. Like, just think about it for a second. The same guy who pronounces kamui as chamoy, like, or kamoi.
Worlds by activating his kamui.
Which is, I don't know, sounds like some sort of sauce. Are you really going to trust his level of Japanese? Notice that he didn't show the actual or the real Japanese panel of the databook. So no one can call him out here. And who's going to bother checking this? Oh, before we look at the actual Japanese characters, can we just point out that he says this?
To grasp the inner workings of heaven and earth is temptatious.
Here he is trying to give a translation of Japanese to English. But he just read this as earth is a temptatious. Tempestous. That's tempestuous.
Temptatious.
Mans can't even read English. Anyways, let's look at the Japanese. So the big bold letters going down the side here says Tenjo no kotowari o shoaku seshi hitomi, which means the heavenly eyes that see the truth of all creation without obstruction. So this is Tenjo, and it says heaven and earth. As you can see, that first two kanji is the same as the one we just looked up, Tenjo, heaven and earth. So what usually happens is when you combine kanji together, the meaning changes. Just like certain words in context have another meaning. So if I said something in English like, that cost me an arm and a leg, I'm trying to say that this is expensive, right? Similar to this. It's not that Itachi can see everything in the universe. Otherwise, Sasuke's Mangekyo Sharingan vision should be greater than Ada's in the current Boruto manga. Why doesn't everybody just downgrade to the Mangekyo Sharingan? Why use that Rinnegan or any of these more powerful dojutsu like Ada's clairvoyance if it's true that Sasuke's Mangekyo Sharingan can see the universe? It makes no sense. So it's literally contradicted. What it's saying is it can see the truth. So most people that have the Mangekyo Sharingan are able to see through Genjutsu and certain jutsu, but not everything, because we know that an evolution of the Sharingan is eventually the different forms of the Rinnegan. And that's why the Rinnegan is far superior, because you can do more. The Limbo clones are in a different dimension, and he even said that in the video. You need the Rinnegan to see them. It's possible to have multiple dimensions in the same universe. In fact, anything is possible in fiction. We see this in Hunter x Hunter. For example, Nov from Hunter x Hunter has a 4-dimensional mansion that exists within the same world of the Hunter x Hunter verse that Nov can just freely escape to. Does this mean Nov from Hunter x Hunter can blow up 4-dimensional constructs like multiverses? No. Unless proven or shown in Hunter x Hunter that this mansion is the same size as a universe, you can't just imply or assume, using the words that Noodles literally use, like it's implied that it's infinite.
Implying that the distance between each realm was infinite rather than finite.
You need to have proof that it's universal or infinite in size. I'm talking like it says, for example, Kaguya's dimension is universal in size. Or Kaguya's dimensions is equal to that of our universe. Or better than that, it's literally depicted like they've got some sort of diagram showing like the Naruto universe, and then this other universe is connected to the main Naruto universe, you know, like a cosmology chart.
Kaguya's worlds are time spaces, which means that Kaguya's dimensions are also referred to as both time spaces and hyperspaces. Both the definitions of hyperspace and time space refer to an extra-dimensional or at least 4D space, which is supported by Black Zetsu's statements that it was going to be the beginning of a new space.
It never said space-time continuum or space-time. It actually says time-space in the English translation. But even Noodles himself said this.
I know the statement says time space, but as many people have mentioned before, this is actually a mistranslation. The kanji used is called kukan, which literally means space in Japanese.
What confuses me here about Noodles' claim is that he says that it's a mistranslation and it's actually space. So if it's space, then why is he claiming that it's a space-time, which is a 4-dimensional construct? Because it didn't say space-time. He's assuming that it says space-time or means time-space or space-time, when really it just says space. So he debunked himself here. Another thing that reaffirms this theory that Kaguya's dimensions are only planetary in size is because of this panel here. It says this root time-space is Mother's exclusive domain where she can directly extract chakra from shinobi trapped in the infinite Tsukiyomi. And there's only shinobi trapped on the shinobi world. So her other time spaces are also planetary in size. So this argument is based on assumption of size, which is fallacious in itself. So I wouldn't take any of these arguments thus far in the video as conclusive evidence that Kaguya's dimension are universal and universal in size. The whole argument here pinned on the fact that they used the kanji tenchi, but they didn't. You can go read the Japanese for yourself. I'll post it here. Sasuke didn't know how to connect to Kaguya's dimension till later. 2. It was never established that he could travel infinitely. Therefore, we can conclude that Sasuke learned how to connect to Kaguya's dimension, which is a finite distance because it was never stated to be infinite nor proven that Sasuke could travel infinitely. Alright, let's look at the next argument.
Naruto in the Momoshiki novel refers to Momoshiki's dimensions as either a hyperspace or a barrier.
As you can see in the third paragraph of this particular translation, it says hyperspace. Now, the important thing to note is, can you see that little bar on the right there? This is the iPhone Notes app, and they took a screenshot, and that's why it's got this little gray bar here on the side. So you're telling me this is a legit source? Like this is actually your source? An iPhone screenshot from somebody who wrote this in notes. There's a lot of fans out there, and there's a lot of unbiased fans, so to speak, and they will translate all these Naruto novels because they like the novels. They don't care about power scaling, they don't care about power levels. They're pretty unbiased. So if you type in Google, notice that Noodles never gave a source, never told you what book this is from, or it didn't actually show you an exact page from the book. This is the book it's from. It's called Naruto Boruto the movie novel, and if you type that in Google, click the free PDF and then Control F search this line. He didn't think they'd gotten very far from the village of Konohagakure. You will then find what it actually says. And every instance where they've ever put the word universe, it was actually written differently. They translated it to be world. Let's read the actual raw Japanese. Does it say parallel universe as Noodles claims, or world? Let's find out. So this is what it says. Naruto wa kurayami no naka ni itta. Konohagakure no sato kara sa hodo hanareta to mo omoenu ga miyoboe no nai basho toyu yori wa ikai datta. So ikai, the red underlined kanji, means the next world. Additionally, yo, the kanji that's underlined in light blue, means world also. So who blatantly lied in this translation? So are we going to take the guy who used an iPhone screenshot from notes, who has clearly tried to change the word world to mean universe when it was never once ever stated in the kanjis? You can't translate these kanjis to be universe. They're only specifically translated to mean world. Look up the word, ikai. Look up these kanji. So this is jisho.org, which is the most reliable Japanese dictionary, and it claims that it means the spirit world, an underworld, or the next world. That doesn't inherently prove that it's universal structure. It still could be a small spirit realm that's the same size as our world. So you've got like the spirit world and then you've got our world, and they live, together simultaneously. This wouldn't suggest that it's universal in size. If anything, it would just mean it's another, like a parallel world, like isekai genre type thing. So, I'm sorry guys, but you've been lied to. Whoever translated this panel, perhaps it was Noodles, perhaps it was King Bullet or Nairobi, whoever it was, lied to you. This word can never mean universe, ikai. Whoever told you it said tenchi, sekai, or whatever, lied to you. Here I have the actual book itself, and you can see these are the pages, right? Right down at the bottom, you can see it says ikai. This is where I underlined in the screenshots that I've been showing before. And it also says, man, this is really hard to use like while looking at a camera. The point being is, I literally have like hard copy of the Japanese novel. All right, so let's continue on with this translation. Noodles also claims that it was a hyperspace. So the word that they used was akukan. So in Japanese, this translates to a subspace or hyperspace. However, a hyperspace is just a means of explaining teleportation. Like think of it like Star Wars, where entering a hyperspace is what they say when they, flying the Millennium Falcon, for example, and then they zoom off and they get to some other place really quick, right? Look at the context of this particular novel. It says that Kaguya could send people via hyperspace. So therefore, it's just a method of transport, and Akukan is not some crazy multiversal structure as Noodle claims. Here is a list of the kanjis that were supposedly translated to mean universe in the fake iPhone Notes app translation. If you look up any of these characters, none of them translate to universe. So this entire argument that Kaguya's dimensions are a hyperspace or multiversal construct is based on a fake script written using the iPhone Notes app.
Novel, where it says that Momoshiki was draining chakra beyond the parallel dimension he made.
In the raw Japanese, the word used was isekai, which translates to another world, especially in fiction, other world, parallel universe, different dimension world, or isekai. Note that it can be translated to be parallel universe. So what does that mean in English? So according to the Oxford Dictionary, a parallel universe in physics is a universe theorized as existing alongside our own. But in science fiction or in fantasy such as Naruto, means that this word, parallel universe, actually means a world that is conceived as coexisting with and having certain similarities to the known world. Now, if you look at the other translation of isekai, it also said different dimension world or another world, especially in fiction. Now, in the other author's translation, or in other words, the translator's translation of the novel, he said it was a parallel dimension he'd made. So if we're using that kanji isekai, this means it's a different dimensional world he made. So I don't inherently disagree with the translation here of parallel dimension, because it can mean a parallel dimension in terms of a world based off the kanji. But it can also, as stated in English, mean parallel universe. And if that's the case, then a parallel universe in fiction is also a world. So I agree with these translations that it is a world. Now, just to emphasize this point a little better, if you search world in the other guy's translation, like this is some random, this is not my translation, by the way. He literally translated ikkai or isekai to mean world every single time. That's 21 times, so it's definitely more consistent that it's a parallel world or another world. Whereas universe literally came up 0 times. Not once was it ever translated to be a universe. So this Boruto 64, Rescue Naruto, is talking about the episode that depicts the same events that is written in the Boruto Naruto, the movie, novel, and the film. So the guy that translated that book from before wrote 21 times the word world. And we already established that isekai in this context, no matter what, even if it's translated to mean parallel universe in English, especially in science fiction and fantasy, means world. So in this panel, if you have a look at the kanji that is highlighted in the box here, it is literally stated isekai. Like they use the same kanji. So whoever translated it to be parallel universe is probably the same person who was using the Notes app. Because if we've already established from a random unbiased translator that isekai was meant to be parallel world, and we also established that parallel universe even in English means a parallel world or a fantasy world, then there's no way that this could have been translated to parallel universe unless if you just felt like making up translations.
Filled to the brim, created to reshape the world. This statement proves that Kaguya was going to return the world to nothing with the Aminominaka, which is Kaguya's ability to move worlds around. In the title description of this ability, it says, creating dimensions as she pleases, doing the exact same thing, to rewrite the world in an instant and make it reality. This is just like Genjutsu. On top of this, the final thing I found in regards to Kaguya and her dimensions is this statement from Kakashi, which directly says Kaguya was going to rewrite the entire world. Renegon possesses the power of two opposing forces that made everything in creation in the universe.
So it's important to note here that he said Kaguya's sekai, or in other words, world. Now I already agree upon the fact that Kukan does in fact mean space. So we can safely conclude that even though they used a fake panel to try and prove that it was universe, the actual translation translated it to mean world every time, and that it is either world or space, which does not mean universe. And even if it was parallel universe for some reason, in fiction, a parallel universe is translated to mean an alternate world. Now the final two arguments that he makes is that Shinra Bancho means all things in the universe, which it doesn't. It just means all things in nature or creation. Secondly, he also argues that the infinite Tsukiyomi is a universal thing. However, in his own panels here, it shows that it says world. So now, as I mentioned before, parallel universe by definition in fiction is another world. So whenever a translator is given a text and it says parallel universe, they mean a world like our own. This means none of these multiversal metas are valid, and thus we understand that all these dimensions are merely planets or worlds.